Well,
Okay.
welcome to Babel, the English progressive rock and psychedelic rock, a little bit of psychedelic rock band from England. And they've released a wonderful album, Who Will I Be When I Leave? Now, definitely, we're going to get into that question. But it's on Melodic Revolution Records, and they released it September 16th of this year. And today we welcome Rob Williams and
Hi.
Karen Langley. And
Hi there.
I'll let them kind of introduce themselves and talk a little bit. The beginning here, they've been compared to the Talking Heads, Frank Zappa's band, Beefheart, Hendrix, Primus, Bethany and Patti Smith. I even threw in the B-52s a little bit.
Throw them in.
Unbelievable time, music, and rhythm changes to the music. You cannot get bored with this music. But that's enough of me. I'm going to let them kind of tell a little bit of their history, and then we'll jump into talking about the album itself.
Wow,
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Mark. That's amazing. Thanks for the introduction. And it's really nice to be here talking to you. And yeah, wow, what a galaxy of stars you've just mentioned. I just, but it's so difficult, isn't it? Because comparisons in music are just so hard because I just have loved music my entire life. I love classical music. I love all sorts of music. So all of that informs everything really that we do. So yeah, I mean, we've been together. How many years have we been together?
A long time.
It's about 20
About
years.
20 years.
About 20 years in various formats. And me and Rob are like the core of the band, and John, the drummer, but we've had lots of different sort of mixtures along the way. So the sound and the music's changed with that as well. So yeah, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, the album is our 9th album. So, you know, we've got quite a backdrop of different albums now. I mean, the hard thing for us, Mark, you might not know, is that, I mean, up until 2018, we were doing a lot of gigs, and we're both also known as looking really very visual and really into doing videos as well. A lot of quite sort of art rocky type videos, fun videos as well. But we haven't been able to do any gigs since the last gig we did was in June 2018. We both got very ill, cancerish, basically. First, Karen was down with stage 4 blood cancer, and she had brutal chemo and a stem cell transplant. She was just coming through it, which was amazing in itself.
She looks amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know. I didn't know it, but you couldn't tell. I mean,
I feel very fortunate, actually. Our wonderful NHS, I've got to say, give them a call out here, because I wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for what I've had given. So, but then Rob got cancer as well.
I wish we had one. I wish we had that over here.
Yeah, I pray every day for that, for you, actually.
Yeah, because we have friends, you know, we get ill and their bills are just like, ruin us, you know, that people have to pay. But as I was saying, just as Karen was coming through, I was diagnosed with stage 3 skin cancer.
Oh my goodness.
So then I was out for about a year. It's left us with like what's called immunocompromised. So we have very low immune system. So we have to be very careful of COVID. I mean, for a lot of people, obviously, it's pretty rough, but if we get it, it could be in hospital and, you know, intubation. So we have been living the life of hermits for a couple of years now.
Well, we have, yes, we have. And because our resilience was down for a while, for a couple of years, but we sort of feel probably back to normal mentally and physically as much as we can. And also during that time, and I think this happened with a lot of people during COVID anyway, as a musician or a creative person, you're thrown back on yourself because you can't do anything. So for us, our survival mechanism, if you like, was making more music and creating more stuff. And that, in a way, was really, it was very different because you can't escape. So you think, okay, what are we going to do? So we made more music.
Yeah, we did about 2 albums and 2 EPs.
You did one on your own when I was in
an
hospital.
instrumental album, yeah.
And Rob, you look very good too. I meant to say that I wouldn't have known either. So excellent.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
Strong immune systems, and
Yeah.
yeah.
I,
But yes,
I'll just
so-
put out the word for Americans over here. I have my 2 boosters and 2 COVID.
Excellent.
Please do it. Don't wait for the thing to hit you.
Oh my goodness, I'm glad you're
Yeah.
saying that. I really am so pleased you're saying that, because
Yeah.
so many people take it as if it's, oh well,
Yeah.
we're through it now.
Yeah.
We're not really.
Yeah, and when people say, "Oh, it's not much worse than a cold," I think, no, I think you're wrong there.
I've known too many people.
You know,
Well, and over here, it almost became a political football.
Yeah.
So to speak.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, I was
Yeah.
reading
it
that.
broke families up, it broke, friendships up over something that, normally you would have walked down and got it done right away.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So we're good now. I mean, we're good.
We're
Both
good.
of us are clear from cancer.
Yeah,
Both of us have had the all clear. We're in remission. I don't like that word, and I don't really identify myself as cancer, because it's too easy to get lost in that.
Yeah.
And personally, I just feel it is part of my experience,
Yeah.
but it can't define who I am, because
good.
I just don't want that to be the definition.
yeah. I mean,
Really.
we should basically tell you, because people say, "Well, you've been quiet, haven't done any gigs." That's the reason, and we're really looking forward to, hopefully, to
Next year,
doing some
23,
do some gigs
2023.
next year.
Yeah, yeah.
And by the way, they in the little intro that we did talking before this, they did mention they're already started on new music. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But good news coming for all you fans. There's
Lovely.
And all right, so let's talk about this album. First of all, how has the album been received globally so far?
A lot of really, really good reviews. A lot of critics have really liked it, and all very similar in kind of being quite knocked out by the blend of the music and the way it shifts and changes, but also Karen's words and the poetry she uses, and also I think the subject material. It's quite she goes to quite not dark places but deep places, and we'd rather sing about, or Karen would rather sing about stuff like that, rather than maybe sing about, I don't know, something which we don't relate to, or fantasy stuff or whatever. We try and make it very, very real. And I think that marks us out a little bit, doesn't it? But in this album, especially, because we were coming out of all that time. And when we recorded the title track, Who Will I Be When I Leave, that was recorded some time ago, and we were still pretty rough. And you were saying, about that, what does that mean? And the whole album is around that aspect, isn't it? I don't know if you say something about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just going to say how it's the best received in some respects of all the albums, and that is in some part due to Anne Claire, who's really helped by connecting us. Mad Dog Promotions.
Bad Dog.
Sorry, my head, I'm tired. Bad Dog Promotions. But I actually think that I feel it's my best work. I mean, I like all the things I do, but I just feel so pleased with this one, because at one point I never thought I was going to do anything ever again. And that really is a difficult thing. It's not only did I think I might not survive, but underneath I was like, I'm never going to do any more music. Oh my God, it's not a good thing. So I was especially pleased that we were able to complete this, even though it took longer than we expected. But we've had some great reviews, really, really great reviews, and a lot of really good feedback.
Yeah, a lot of really good American reviews, and a lot of French
and
reviews,
France,
and European.
And Italy.
Italy too. Yeah. So that's nice to know.
I'm glad you brought up Anne Claire, and we just want to definitely shout out to her. She's been wonderful. She's the one that brought all this together.
Oh, she is fantastic.
I really didn't know much about Babal, and she said, take a look at this, please review it, listen to it. And so again, thank you, Anne Claire.
Definitely. Wish her all the very best
to me, and I really appreciate that, because they're wonderful. So definitely a shout out to her.
Absolutely. it's really given us a shot in the arm, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Working
And
with
nice to meet her.
Anne-Claire.
Such a
And
nice
lovely,
person.
lovely lady. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Do you want to talk briefly about tour plans? Because I think you said 23. Anything in the works for this year?
Nothing
this year, most definitely.
No,
It's
nothing
almost
this year.
over, but yeah.
And for next year, it's still very much in motion. So, I can't say much about it. Primarily, it will be British gigs, possibly Europe. We'd love to get to the States, but at the moment, it's just, it's logistically, it's really hard to do at the moment.
And hopefully some festivals as well, because we had festivals planned before we got ill. So we're going back to those promoters who obviously they've been great, and they said, let us know when you're back on form. So we have got some irons in the fire. So yeah.
And that would be with a full band, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, normally, John is the mainstay. He's always been with us, the drummer, and he plays a big part in what he plays. And he's an incredible musician, and his drumming is amazing. John never goes like, oh, just play the straight, four on the four. He would just experiment and play around it. And because we played so long together, we get quite intuitive about what we're playing, because a lot of our stuff, like today, we had our old friend Paul as well playing bass, who's been on a lot of our albums, Paul Smith. And what we do is we put everything into it. We play into our 8-track, all on separate tracks, and we just jam basically. But our improvisations are such that because we've been doing that for such a long time, a lot of people, when we place like a raw improvisation to someone, say, wow, is that an improvisation? It's like, it sounds really together, because we're kind of tuning into each other. And then what happens, and this is quite what happened for the last few albums, is that once we get those basic raw tracks down, then we'll start looking at them in detail. And what I quite often do is that I'll take out maybe the bits, some of the musical parts of it, and I might just keep the drums and Karen's voice, and then I'll work around Karen's voice in terms of keeping the arrangement moving through it. So I love the idea of, I like the word cinematic. So it's constantly evolving and changing rather than just staying with the same riff or the groove. The groove is there, but you kind of adding different layers along as you go along, so it constantly changes and moves. And that's what really I enjoy doing. And your singing is, Karen can just do a take, in these improvisations, and it's very rare. I don't think you ever had to redo them. It's just, that's it.
Well, usually we take the impro and the best parts, because there are obviously some not good parts. I'm not saying it's all great. And then what we'll do is we'll finalize what that is, which part, and eventually I'll layer up vocals, my own vocals on top. So very much for me, I look at the main raw vocal, and then I'll think, well, actually, that needs boosting there, and it's almost like making the song again, and that's how we've always worked.
I mean, in the early days, there were more songs, and I'd maybe sit down with chord sequences and different parts, and we say, what do you think of this? And then you'd see if you could work with it.
We rarely do that now.
Because sometimes we do. Who will I be when I leave? It's one of the few tracks where I gave you the music, and you were just like, well, that's got to me. Yeah. But it makes it, the way we work generally, I think it's much more fluid, and it's inclusive, rather than, here's a piece of music, okay, I want you to put some vocals on top of it. And obviously, I know, we all listen to a lot of music. You can quite often tell when that's been done. I mean, the singers doing a great job contributing and adding something to it. But I think if you've got something which is like really cohesive, it just all seems to move together. And that's the magic for me, really.
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this brilliant album. I really enjoyed 3 minutes. Tell us about your inspiration for that song and the meaning from your standpoint. I mean, everyone draws their own.
I know. Yeah. I think it was David Bowie, who's my biggest influence, who famously said, you probably know more about my songs than I do, because I don't remember half of them. And I used to think that was so accurate, because sometimes people will say, oh, what about that song? I'm thinking, oh, oh, what was that? Oh God, you know. But yeah, this is fresh. This is fresh.
3
So
minutes,
I
yeah.
can remember 3 minutes. Originally, at the time, I read a lot. I'm a total cinephile, and I read loads of things. And I was really into reading about Houdini. And Harry Houdini, who's a fascinating character by anyone's book.
Mm.
And it fascinated me, this idea of 3 minutes, because often we hear of 3 minute warning, 3 minute this, 3 minutes is an often quoted thing. And I was thinking he would have 3 minutes to get out of these locks and chains, thrown into the river, and 3 minutes. And it's just fascinated me. So I sort of wove the song around that, but it's metaphorical because it means so many other things as well, about being locked and breaking free. There's so many sort of allegories in it, really. So, but that was the basic. It was Harry Houdini that got me onto it, really. Yeah. And musically, it was the sort of mechanical, the sort of push. It really felt like that sort of chugging, grooving feeling. It was almost like I could feel myself struggling, you know, to get out of something.
To break through.
Yeah.
And then on another level, it's kind of like trying to break out of the restrictions of, you know, what we find ourselves in our lives, how the economy holds us back, you know, poverty, everything else, you know, just trying to break out of this kind of capitalist thing that we're all trapped in. So, you know, you can look at it on quite a few different levels, can't you? And that's the beauty of lyrics, really.
Yeah, and it's funny enough, a lot of people like that one, and I'm really glad we put it at the front of the album, because putting an album together and putting the tracks in the order, that's one of the hardest things, is deciding now what's going to really get people interested so that they go, wow, that's interesting. Because if you put something too, I mean, we've got some really long tracks and we're good at that, but if you put that up front, very often people think, oh yeah, this is really long and I'm not sure. So I wanted something that was going to grab people. Well, that's how, so we sort of agreed it together, didn't we? Where to put that one.
Yeah, for sure. It felt like track number one,
so we had to go there.
Yeah.
Yep. And you're absolutely right. I think you need something to get it started, but I'm one of those people that actually does like the long track. So
good.
For both. How about Sitting Pretty? It's another stunner. Tell us a little bit about the origins on that.
Well, we spend our holidays down in Devon, in fact, Plymouth often, which is where the American forefathers went from. In fact, we usually visit the place where they went from.
There's a plaque there.
There's the plaque. But there's also a place there called King William Yard, and it's very old merchant buildings where there's like a quartermaster's stores.
It was all the warehouses from the Royal Navy where they keep all their stores and their munitions back in the Victorian era. And now it's a big sort of shishi type of what.
Well, people live there now.
People live there, and there's a lot of posh shops there and stuff. Yeah.
But the thing was, it was actually prior to that, it was a place where they sold slaves.
Yeah.
And so we were there one day. We'd gone over on the boat, and we were sat there, and I was looking at this forecourt, which would have been the actual place where the slaves stood. And I suddenly really got this, and I was looking at it, and I was surrounded by people drinking coffee and laughing and taking selfies and having a wonderful time. And I suddenly got this real contrast with this line of people stood there waiting to be sold. And it just really hit me. So for me, it came from that. And it had a light jazzy feel. The music is very sort of jazzy, and I wanted it to be almost, hey, this is a nice, pleasant track, but you know, it's not. And I wanted that in there. Yeah. So that's sort of like that, really. I mean, musically, we did a lot to that. We had to chop and change quite a lot, because I did a big section in there, which we eventually decided to take out because it didn't quite sit. It just didn't sit right. So in that one, we did cut a chunk out, and it worked. So I was glad we did, actually. So
much more cohesive.
It is.
Good track. I like that one.
So that's the dark side of Sitting Pretty.
I'm glad you gave that to me, because and most people would never know that background. Excellent. Corkscrew Rider, great video and great music, fantastic keyboards. Tell us a little bit about that one. That was one of my
thing I'll say, Mark, there's no keyboards on the album.
Oh,
I play a lot of guitar synth apart from
Okay.
general guitar. I've always been into guitar synthesis, and I've got about 3 guitar synths over the years. So all the sounds that sound like keyboards and that are played on the strings.
Okay.
So, but don't worry. I mean, yeah, it does
It's a
sound like
mistake
it sounds
people
like
make.
keys, and somebody
Yeah.
says, "Yeah, great key sound," but it's actually all come from the guitar synth and my hitting the strings in certain ways.
Yeah.
Um,
So that song was great because you and John and Paul,
yeah,
that was just completely came, didn't it?
just came that one, yeah, because that's got Paul Smith on acoustic bass. He's a great
double bass
player. He plays electric bass too, but he's a bit of a jazzer, and I love the way he always plays around my notes in lots of interesting ways, and he's on that track as well as one of the others we'll get to, but yeah, that one really worked when we just did it, didn't it? And then we
and for the words side of it, many times over the years I've had unfortunate incidences on fairground rides. I've had about 17 head injuries in my life from various things. I won't go into that, but several of them were on those rides. But also I was on a ride once with our children, and it was a big wheel, a Ferris wheel, and we got to the top and I suddenly realized I couldn't do it. I was terrified. I suddenly had a total panic attack, and I looked at the guy down below and I went and he went and he brought it down really slowly because he didn't want to frighten everybody. And then I got off because I was as white as a sheet. And I just suddenly thought, and also I did the corkscrew at Alton Towers. It's a famous one, the corkscrew ride. And it basically goes round, loops the loop, you go upside down. And I got off and I couldn't walk. And I thought, why on earth did I do that?
And you lose your lunch.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt like we go through life and often we just get on the ride and we think, oh, this will be all right.
Yeah.
This will be okay. And then you're on it. And it's too bloody late because you're strapped in.
Yeah.
You can't get out, and you got to keep going till the end.
Yeah.
And so I felt it was a really good sort of way of saying that.
Yeah.
Really,
it reminded us of a very famous comedian that we really, really love, Bill Hicks, who actually died, must be a good 20 years ago.
Yeah, Bill Hicks.
And he always used to say that, didn't he? Life's just a ride. You're on the ride. You just got to take the ride.
That really does always stick with me.
Yeah,
it's just a ride.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice one. Good. Well remembered.
Bill.
Yeah.
All right. Dead End Friends. Another favorite. I like that song. There definitely is a meaning behind that. So I'll let you guys talk about that.
What do you like about that song, can I ask? Dead End Friends? Because that is the
music. But go ahead. You talk about the meaning behind it.
Again, it's from the words point of view. We often trust people or have trusted people, not us, I mean anybody, generically. We trust people we think are our friends, they're not. Yeah. And then we find out the hard way. Yeah. But then sometimes those people will still pretend to be nice to us. So dead end friends will always feed you. It's almost like going back to abuse, if you like, going back to a place that's not good for you. You keep going back, but somehow you can't stop. Yeah. And it's sort of the song, it's sort of quite sad. It's got a poignancy. The very beginning with the oboe or the clarinet, oboe, which to me is very sort of has a very poignant, sad sound to it. And so I wanted that in the vocals. And some of the vocals, somebody said, "Oh, that reminded me of Marianne Faithfull." And I said, "Oh, that is a huge compliment," because I had that sort of feeling like Broken English, that sort of feeling where it's so sad. And it's a ballad, but it ends up quite big at the end.
And then it really goes whoosh at the end.
Takes off. Yeah.
But it's quite, I mean, the lyrics are quite heavy about standing on the ledge. You think, I'm going to stand over the ledge. And at one point you're talking with a dead man's phone. It's got quite a few, as if sometimes people, can't stand anymore. And maybe it's down to life and the friends actually weren't there, which quite often happens. Quite often,
not because they don't want to be,
no,
because sometimes people aren't there.
It just can't be
and
there.
I think that is something that you realize when you've been through very serious illness, that people don't always have an understanding of how to behave with you. And very often people that love you aren't there. That is a fact, because everyone has their own ways of dealing with things. And I think that is reflected in this album, actually, not in a bitter way, but in a way I try to say, well, you know what, in a way you're on your own.
It's reality. Yeah.
You're on your own, basically. Yeah. So yes, it's a deep one, and that's one of the older songs on the album.
Actually,
that one's
it was,
been around a few years, but never quite sort of was in the right space for that whatever particular album we were doing.
No,
at
it
the
didn't
time.
fit anywhere, and we had it produced and done. It just didn't go anywhere, but it went here.
So this is the album for it. Yeah.
Well, that I don't know if you guys heard about this, but Queen just released a song from Freddie Mercury that kind of summed up those same feelings.
I haven't heard it.
If you haven't heard it, definitely.
I must take a listen.
It's sad. It's hard to hear it.
I must get
when you know what he's gone through. But but he's who he is. He's incredible. And the band, of course. But they just released it, and it's anyway. But
thanks for the heads up.
I did. It reminds me. I must check that out.
Yeah. The Wolf Slips Up Quickly. I love the titles of some of your songs.
And that is the only song on the album and in any of our albums that I haven't written. The words are by Lee Henderson, who's an American journalist who writes a lot of reviews. And we'd been sort of in and out talking to Lee for quite a while with the last album. He loves our stuff. Good friend. And he said, look, I've got this piece of poetry. He said, I'd love Babal to make it into a song. He said, look, you do what you want. He said, I'll just give you the words. He said, chop them up, do whatever you want, make it whatever you want. He said, and I said, fine, we will. And he didn't know I was going to put it on the album. When I told him, he said, oh, I'm really chuffed. I am so chuffed. And I said, as long as that's okay with you. He said, yes. And so we did it. And again, it's very poignant. Lee's words are incredibly hard-hitting, actually. And of course, he's got the American point of view in a slightly different way than me, but we're sort of on the same page politically or socially, whatever you want to say. And so I felt, and I was really pleased. I thought it was great to do that, because I usually just do my own stuff. So it was a challenge for me, well, and for you too.
It was, it was a challenge to sort of see it in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
And that song was quite. That song is quite proggy, in terms of time signatures and time shifts. So it was a good one to do, and it all seemed to fit together. It was a nice one to play. That. But it was something different for us, simply because I like a new type of input, and it was a challenge for you then, although you came to terms with it very, very well. And
I was more worried doing that song than any others on the album, simply because it's someone else's words. And although I have done covers over the years and I've sung other people, I used to do we used to do a great version of Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division. And I could get my head around that and make it my own. But this was someone else's words, someone else's meaning. And so I really wanted to make sure I did it justice. So it was the hardest one to do. Yeah. Very much.
Made Without Instructions kind of reminds me of the whole concept of parenting. You're all of a sudden you're a parent. There are no instructions. You have
absolutely
your parents to help you. You don't want to do the same thing, make the same mistakes they did. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, that's very true. What you said is actually a really good description, because we are made without instructions. We sort of come to this earth. We don't really know why we're here. We bumble along, and actually you do the best you can with what you've got. And you've no idea sometimes what's going on. And yet within that, I do think there's a lot of strength within that. I don't know about you. As I've got older, I know less. I mean, you're young, you're full of everything. You know what you want, and then you get this. I think, well, actually, it's all a bit of a mystery. I think the word I would use is it's about the mystery. We're made without instructions.
Yeah.
And I liked the
Well,
robotic thing about it as well. So yeah.
by our age, we know the common things, the things that are daily, how to survive the daily world. But you're right. There are so many mysteries still in the world that we can't, even PhDs and scientists and all the other people can't explain.
Yeah.
And